So, in our genetics unit, we're going to be doing a lot of in class work on problems and um, projects and labs and whatnot. And so, consequently, rather than have this unit go on forever and ever, we're going to take advantage of flipped classrooms. So, the idea is you're going to do some work when you can take advantage of working with partners or getting help from me. You can do that during class. And then the simple sitting and taking notes, you'll actually do at home using this video format. So we're going to do formal notes in a bit, but before we do our lab, we need to have just a couple of vocabulary terms under our belt. So a good place for you to keep track of these would be in your genetics foldable. Remember, you have one for meiosis. This would be a separate one for genetics. We're going to do just a few of the terms. Remember, the definition goes in on the flap so that when you flip it over, you can quiz yourself. Okay, so there are 5 terms we need for this lab. The first of which is trait. A trait is an inherited characteristic. So if you look at my grandma and my dad, which are both are in the picture, my dad inherited my grandma's nose, which I also have. However, my grandma and my dad were both born in Scotland. My grandma, on the day she died, still had a Scottish accent. My dad, though he had it when he was a baby, doesn't have it now and didn't pass it on to me. That's because that's something that he acquired after he was born. And so, although it's a characteristic, what accent a person speaks of is not an inherited characteristic, thus we wouldn't talk about it in genetics. Another vocabulary term we need is gene. It's a term you hear all the time, but you may not know the exact definition. So remember, our DNA is divided up into chromosomes, and on those chromosomes are thousands or perhaps more genes. So sections of the DNA that code for a particular trait. So on one chromosome, if there's thousands of genes, one small section of that might contain the portion of DNA that codes for particular traits, such as whether or not you have a widow's peak, or another section of the chromosome might have whether or not you have a hitchhiker's thumb. An allele is the word we use to describe different versions of a trait. So, for example, for hairline, some people like me and the person in this picture might have a widow's peak, so the little indentation here. Other people have a straight hairline. So, for that trait, there are 2 different versions, having a widow's peak or not. So, those would be the 2 different alleles. Keep in mind that we're going to simplify things in this unit quite a bit. In reality, we may say somebody either has a hitchhiker's thumb or doesn't have a hitchhiker's thumb, but the alleles are actually a little bit more complicated than that. There's a great variation. So we're just keeping things simple by saying yes or no. Before I mention our last 2 vocabulary terms, I just want to remind you of something. A normal cell for humans have 46 chromosomes. That is the result of sexual reproduction, in which you get an egg cell from your mom that has 23, an egg cell from your dad that also has 23, and when they combine, you have 23 pairs, or in other words, 23 homologous chromosomes. Meiosis makes it so that there is just one of each chromosome, and then when there's fertilization, you get one of each chromosome from mom, one of each chromosome from dad, and so for every chromosome, you have 2 copies. Since genes are on chromosomes, for every gene, you also have 2 copies. This leads us to something called a genotype. So a genotype is the combination of alleles an organism has. So it's represented by 2 letters. So for example, if I got the widow's peak from my mom and the widow's peak from my dad, I would have 2 widow's peak alleles. So my genotype, we would represent it by having, so in this case we could use a P. It could be a capital letter or a lowercase. We'll use a capital letter. And so if I got the same allele, widow's peak, from both my mom and my dad, I would have 2 P's. So big P, big P. It's possible I get something different, so I could have a big P, little p. So we take a look at these 2 chromosomes in this picture, let's say the red one's from mom and the blue one's from dad. There's really thousands, but in this picture there's 3 genes, and mom is giving a big P, a little a, and a big B. Dad is giving a big P, a little a, and a little b, so we see that there's different combinations. Now we'll get into what the big letter means and the little letter means later, but for now, it's just what combinations do you have? What alleles did you inherit from your parents? The genotype represents what alleles you possess in your DNA. That's not always the same as what alleles you express. And so what traits you express is called the phenotype, or the outward expression of a trait. So for example, do you have a widow's peak or don't you? You can say you have big P, little p, but what does that mean? Do you have one or don't you? Do you have a hitchhiker's thumb or don't you have one? Do you have long eyelashes or the short eyelashes? So another way of looking at it is genotype is the letter combination and phenotype is the words about what actual traits you have. The nice thing about this format is it allows me to check and see how much you understand. So let's take a minute and review these vocabulary terms. So in today's lab, we're going to pretend to have babies. So each one of you will need a partner. If there's not an even number of people, then just like real families, sometimes families are blended with multiple moms and dads. So if you're going to work in a group of 3, one of you will be a parent for both of your 2 other partners. So you're gonna get 2 things. You're gonna need this packet. This packet will guide you. I'm gonna keep these, so don't take these home with you. You're gonna need 3 actually. A data table, and then finally, each of you is gonna need a baggie. It is crucial that you don't lose the pieces of my baggie. It literally takes hours and hours to make all these, so don't lose them, please. So the first thing that happens is you're going to get married. So in other words, you're going to decide on who you're going to work with. And then we're going to simulate gametogenesis. In other words, we're going to simulate meiosis, the production of sperm and egg. So to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to take your little Ziploc and you're going to give it a good shake. It works best if you kind of open it up a little bit, give it a shake like that, and then you're going to dump out your chromosomes. Okay, so I'm pretending to be the mom in this scenario, and so I've dumped out my pink chromosomes, and you'll notice that the chromosomes are of different length, and you'll also notice that the chromosomes are numbered. So you could just leave them like this, but the easiest way to do is to line them up. Now, when you dump them out, we're pretending that every person is heterozygous. In other words, we're pretending that every person has the same complement of DNA. And so on one side, if you'll notice, there's a capital R. On the other side, there's a lowercase r. We're just going to go with whatever lands. So the easiest thing to do would be to line them up by size, which also corresponds to number. So 1 would go first, 2 would be second, and so forth. This makes it go a little faster later on. So if you take a second and do that, when you first get started, you'll save a lot of time. So I have my chromosomes set up on my counter, but I realize that I am missing chromosome number 7. Some inconsiderate person didn't take the time to make sure that they got all of the chromosomes back in the box. So I have to go up and get a new one from the teacher. So here's my number 7. We're simulating meiosis simply by whatever fell up, when you dumped out the chromosomes, whichever side was up is the side that gets passed on to the offspring. So you'll see for number 1, chromosome number 1, there's a couple of genes on it. And I have gene A, which is lowercase, and gene R, which is capital. So now that I've got my chromosomes lined up and my partner has his, I'm going to fill out my data table. So I put my name here, and I'm going to be the mom, so I put my name there, and my partner's going to be my cat, so I put his name there. So now I go to actually mating and actually having kids. So to do that, I'm going to open up the book. And I'm going to just start going through the book 1 page at a time, starting with the sex. So as I take a look, it says to look at the chromosomes marked X and Y. So I have on my sheet, on my counter, an X. My partner also has an X. And so consequently, we're going to have a girl. Our genotype is going to be XX. If, however, the blue one had landed upwards and landed on the Y, our combination would have been XY. And so we're going to record that on the data sheet. Oh, from me, the baby is getting an X. From my partner, the baby is getting a Y. The genotype is XY, and it's going to be a girl. So I'm going to go ahead and name her Isabel after my dog. So we go on to the next trait. The next trait is face shape. And as we look at face shape, it tells us that we're going to look at chromosome number 1. So chromosome number 1, for me, the big one, face shape is the R. So I'm going to look at the R, and I have a big R. My partner has a little r. And so I'm going to go ahead and write my allele is big. So I'm going to put a big R. My cat's allele is a little r. So then our genotype is going to be the combination big R, little r. Finally, to figure out what we put for this last one, we have to go to the booklet. So if we look at the booklet, it says, chromosome number 1 contains genetic information the gene we'll call R. This information determines the general shape of the face. Place your baby's genotype for the face shape in the data table, which I just did. So I had big R, little r. So according to this picture, big R, little r corresponds to a round face shape. So, out of the way, Isaac. I'm going to write the word round in here. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go around and go through all of my list to figure out what my genotype is. I don't need to know anything about what the capital letters mean. I'm just going to go through my list. Now you'll notice there's a couple of traits that are a little funky. So for example, skin color and hair color has a whole bunch of different choices. So to do that, I'm literally going to do the same thing. I'm going to look at the traits. So for skin color, I'm going to look at what chromosomes I have up for number 1, what chromosome my partner and I have up for number 4, and for number 2. And as you can see, I'm looking at the A's. And I'll record my combination. So maybe between Isaac and myself, we have 3 of each. So I'm going to record here, maybe... I'm not looking at the moment, but maybe I have one big A, a little a, and a little a, and Isaac gave me a big A, and a little a. So I'm going to put big, 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 little, little, little as my genotype. And according to this chart, my skin color is going to be kind of a median tone. Now I realize that the charts are black and white and that makes things a little tricky. So, this chart is online, and so if you look for 3, it's going to be a medium. That's kind of hard to read there, but 3 is going to be a medium skin tone, so that would be like somebody who's maybe lightly skinned, African American who's lightly skinned, or maybe somebody of Middle Eastern descent. And so you can write whatever you want. If you want to say medium or super dark or light, whichever, fair, that's fine. This packet is online, so if you need to consult it, feel free. It's on Moodle. As you go through the packet, you'll notice that for some characteristics, there's only 2 choices, but others, though they may have 2 alleles, still have 3 options. And so for those, they're indicated as read carefully because it's exceptionally important that you make sure you're following the instructions in the packet. One very important thing that I need you to do, like I said, these are a pain to cut out, so please make sure that you get all of the chromosomes back in the bags, and that once you're done, you look around, you check the floor, you check the tables and whatnot to make sure that you really did get all 23 pieces back in the bag, and the pinks are in one bag, and the blues are in another. Okay, so when you're all done and you've got your entire data table filled out, you and your partner should have the exact same information because you're talking about the exact same kid. If you had to be in a group of 3, then whoever was the mom or the dad that had kids with 2 people, their information for the mom role or the dad role should be exactly the same, and then each of their partners would have a different set of information for mom. The person who had 2 kids would just pick which kid he or she wanted to record on their sheet. So when you're all done, you have a couple of things to do. The first is there's a few questions here for you to answer. And then the second one is for you to draw a headshot of your baby. So a yearbook picture as a teenager. So we're not trying to draw, a baby with a pacifier in its mouth or anything like that. So you're going to draw it here or on a separate sheet of paper. It doesn't have to be artistic, but it should look like what your traits represent. So if it's got freckles, make sure you have freckles. If it's got curly hair, make sure you draw it with curly hair. And if you're wondering how you do that, if you're not sure on the drawing, the pictures in the booklet will help. So it shows you kind of what a pointy chin should look like versus a round, or what a cleft chin should look like versus the absent of cleft chin. Okay, so this is due next class. Please don't spend a very long time drawing the baby pictures because it's really not the important component of this. Before you get started, let's take one more break to make sure you understand the instructions.